Unit 1, The Road to Rebellion. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe why the relationship between the colonists and England became bitter, list several events and laws that led to colonial rebellion, and identify key documents that promoted independence. Why did people migrate to America? If you understand this, you start to understand why the people eventually got irritated with the British government and decided to rebel. A lot of people came for economic opportunities. It was difficult to be a landowner in Britain because of the way the laws of inheritance were set up. People also came hoping to get rich from resources, initially looking for things like gold and silver, and then later finding that they could make more money growing crops like tobacco. Other people came to have freedom of worship. A number of colonies were established so that certain groups would have religious freedom. And that doesn't mean that they granted everyone else in the colony religious freedom, but they were free to practice the religion that they'd brought with them in places like Plymouth and Massachusetts. Other colonies had more freedom. Maryland, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania all granted freedom of worship to a number of different groups. Some people migrated to America simply to seek adventure. They were risk takers and they were looking for a new life in a new land. How were the colonies governed? Well, it varied by the way that the charter was issued and the way that the colonies were organized, but by and large, governors and democratic assemblies were in control of the colonies, and the colonists were pretty much able to make the laws that they wanted and to take care of legislative matters as they pleased. They were governed by English Parliament, mainly with regards to trade, but mostly Parliament practiced a policy that's come to be known as salutary neglect. And what that really means is that England allowed the colonists to rule themselves with very little interference from the king or Parliament. The colonists developed a sense of self-rule while still viewing themselves as English citizens with all the rights and freedoms they were entitled to with that status. What changed to make the colonists rebel against England? Well, the French and Indian War began in the 1750s, and it was the colonists, certain Indian tribes, and the British fighting against the French and other Indian tribes. It's also known as the 7 Years' War. This war really ended French influence in North America, and it increased tensions between the colonists and the British once the war was over, because the colonists felt freer to move west. They were coming into more conflict with Native American tribes. The war also increased the number of British soldiers who were stationed in the colonies, and this caused a number of conflicts. And the war resulted in debt that the Parliament believed the colonists should help pay. In fact, the French and Indian War really plants the seeds for the American Revolution. Even before the war began, the colonists had a sense that they were going to need to unify and protect their interests. And they attempted this through a plan known as the Albany Plan of Union that Benjamin Franklin proposed. And the message that Franklin was trying to get out to the people before the war began is depicted in this cartoon, where you see this snake that's divided into parts, and each of the parts represents one of the colonies. And the message says, "Join or die." Franklin realized that if the colonies were going to be successful in terms of representing and protecting their interest, they'd have to be unified. Once the war ended, tensions escalated between colonists and the government in England. Parliament passed a series of acts that the colonists considered offensive and unwarranted. These included, but were not limited to, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, the Declaratory Act, the Tea Act, and a group of acts passed in 1774 known as the Coercive or Intolerable Acts. And we'll be talking more about what each of these acts means in class. The shot heard round the world marks the beginning of the Revolutionary War. It happened in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, with the Battle of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775. Now, even though the war began, it's important to realize that the colonists were divided over what was really the best course of action. There were people known as loyalists who thought that it would be best to remain part of England and try to work out some sort of agreement with Parliament. There were patriots who were certain that independence was the way to go, and there were a whole lot of people in the middle who weren't sure which course of action would be best. As this period of rebellion draws to a close and the war takes over in earnest in 1776, independence is declared. And there are two key documents that really underscore what's going on in this period. The first was published by a British man named Thomas Paine. It's called Common Sense, and it encouraged the colonists to declare their independence and establish a new nation. The second document is a very famous document in our history. It's the Declaration of Independence, and it comes really in several parts. It defines the beliefs of the patriots and why they think rebellion is necessary. It lists the grievances or complaints that the colonists have against the king and Parliament, and it officially severs the ties with the king and Parliament. Now, this is the end of this video, The Road to Rebellion. Please review your notes. If you need to rewind or review the video, do so now, and we'll be working on these topics in more detail in class.